The meeting hall was silent. Ambassador Thelnax looked at the holographic display floating above the council table. His 6 eyes blinked slowly as he tried to understand what he was seeing. The images showed destruction on a scale he had never witnessed before. 3 human colony worlds had been attacked. 40 million humans were dead. The Krell Empire had struck without warning. Their warships had appeared in human space and opened fire immediately. The humans had no chance to defend themselves. Cities burned. Orbital stations exploded. Children died in their beds as fire rained from the sky. Thelnax had been a diplomat for 300 years. He had seen wars before. But this was different. The Krell were known for their brutality, but they usually gave warnings. They usually made demands. This time they simply killed and left. The Galactic Coalition had maintained peace for 10,000 years. When conflicts arose, the member species talked. They negotiated. They found solutions that did not involve mass murder. The system worked because everyone feared what would happen if they broke the peace. The entire galaxy would unite against them. Thelnax had immediately contacted the human government. He offered them membership in the coalition. He promised protection. He guaranteed that the combined fleets of 40 species would defend human space from further attacks. The humans would be safe. The human representative had listened politely. Her name was Ambassador Chen. She was young by coalition standards, barely 60 years old. Her face was calm as she heard the offer. Too calm, Thelnax thought. When he finished speaking, she smiled. It was not a happy smile. "Thank you for the generous offer," Ambassador Chen said. "But humanity will handle this ourselves." Thelnax tried to explain. The Krell had 5,000 warships. They controlled 100 worlds. They had fought the coalition to a standstill twice before. Humanity was new to space. They had perhaps 200 military vessels. They were outmatched. "We understand," Chen replied. "And we still decline. This is our problem. We will solve it." The transmission ended. Thelnax reported the conversation to the Coalition Council. Most representatives were relieved. If the humans wanted to fight their own battles, that was their choice. The Coalition would not risk ships defending a species that refused membership. Some species even suggested that the humans would likely negotiate with the Krell. They would pay tribute or surrender territory. It was the logical choice. 2 weeks later, everything changed. The Coalition monitoring stations detected a massive energy signature leaving human space. It was enormous. Thelnax requested visual data. What he saw made his blood run cold. The ship was 15 kilometers long. It was shaped like a blade with armor plating that seemed to absorb light. Weapons covered every surface. Thelnax counted 200 main gun batteries. The energy readings showed power plants that could supply an entire planet. The vessel radiated such heat that it distorted space around it. The Coalition database had nothing like it. No species had ever built a warship this large. It violated a dozen treaties. The firepower alone was illegal by galactic law. This single ship could destroy fleets. It could crack planets. Thelnax immediately contacted Ambassador Chen again. His voice was urgent. He explained that the ship violated every rule of warfare. The Coalition could not allow such a weapon to exist. The humans must deactivate it immediately. Chen looked tired. She had dark circles under her eyes. "We did not sign your treaties," she said quietly. "We are not members of your coalition. Your laws do not apply to us." "But the destruction," Thelnax pleaded. "That ship could kill billions. It could turn worlds into wastelands." "Yes," Chen agreed. "That is exactly what it was designed to do. The Krell killed 40 million of our people, our children, our parents, our lovers and friends. They did it without mercy, without warning, without reason." Her voice grew colder. "We will respond in kind." The transmission showed the ship in the background behind Chen. Painted on its hull in letters 300 meters tall was its name. "UNSC Retribution." "That ship is commanded by Admiral Elena Volkov," Chen continued. "She lost her daughter in the attacks. Her only child. The Admiral has been given full authority to prosecute this war as she sees fit. She will not stop until the Krell Empire surrenders or ceases to exist." Thelnax felt fear grip his hearts. He had studied human history. These creatures came from a death world. Their planet tried to kill them constantly. Storms that could flatten cities. Earthquakes that could split continents. Predators that hunted them. Disease that killed millions. Humans survived by being more vicious than everything trying to kill them. Other species evolved on peaceful worlds. They developed intelligence and society. Humans evolved in constant war with their own planet. They learned to build weapons. They learned to destroy. They became very good at it. Please, Thelnak said. Reconsider. There must be another way. Diplomacy, negotiations, we can mediate. Chen shook her head. The Krell had their chance for diplomacy. They chose violence. Now they will learn what happens when you awaken something that should have been left sleeping. She leaned forward. We will not be victims again. Tell your coalition to stay out of our way. The transmission ended. Thelnak sat in silence for a long time. He pulled up the file on War Marshal Kresh, the leader of the Krell Empire. Kresh was a proud warrior. He came from a long line of conquerors. The Krell believed that strength was everything. They respected only power. Thelnak sent a message to Kresh. He warned him about the human warship. He begged the Krell to negotiate before it was too late. The response came back within an hour. Kresh was laughing. One ship? The War Marshal said. The weak humans send one ship against the might of the Krell Empire? Let them come. We will add their bones to the pile with the rest of their pathetic species. They should have accepted extinction quietly. Thelnax closed the communication. He felt a terrible certainty settle over him. The Krell did not understand. They thought in terms of numbers. They had more ships, so they would win. They had never faced an enemy that did not care about numbers. An enemy that would sacrifice everything for revenge. The UNSC Retribution left human space and jumped to faster-than-light travel. Its destination was classified, but Thelnax knew where it was going. He had seen this before, thousands of years ago. A species pushed too far, a species that decided mercy was weakness, a species that chose total war. That species was extinct now. They had destroyed their enemies. Then they had destroyed themselves. The galaxy had taken 3,000 years to recover from that war. Thelnax wondered if history was about to repeat itself. He sent one final message to the Coalition Council. It was simple. Prepare evacuation protocols for all worlds near Krell space. The humans have gone to war. May the stars have mercy on us all because they will show none. The Krell military outpost on Krellthar was buzzing with activity. 2 billion Krell lived on this world. Half were soldiers. The other half supported them with food, weapons, and supplies. The planet was a fortress. Orbital defense platforms surrounded it. Shield generators could protect the surface from bombardment. 300 warships patrolled the system. Admiral Elena Volkov stood on the bridge of the Retribution. Her face showed no emotion as she looked at the tactical display. The Krell defenses were impressive. Any normal fleet would need months to break through. She had no intention of breaking through. Open a channel to the surface, she ordered. Her voice was steady, cold. All frequencies. Make sure everyone can hear. The communications officer nodded. A moment later, every screen, every radio, every device on Krellthar received the same message. Admiral Volkov spoke clearly. This is Admiral Elena Volkov of the United Nations Space Command. You have 24 hours to evacuate this planet. After that time, Krellthar will be destroyed. This is your only warning. The transmission ended. On the surface, Krell military commanders looked at each other. Some laughed. Others were confused. One human ship was threatening an entire fortified world? It was insanity. Fleet Commander Vrax was in charge of the system defenses. He was a veteran of 30 battles. He had never lost a fight. When he heard the human message, he roared with laughter. The weak humans think they can frighten us, he announced to his officers. Send the fleet. Destroy that pathetic ship. Bring me the human admiral alive. I want to mount her head on my wall. 300 Krell warships moved to intercept the Retribution. Each ship was heavily armed. Each ship had fought in dozens of battles. The Krell were confident. Their fleet had destroyed coalition task forces before. One human ship would be easy prey. On the Retribution bridge, Captain James Morrison watched the Krell fleet approach. He was Admiral Volkov's second in command. He had served with her for 15 years. He knew her better than anyone. He saw the grief she carried. He saw the rage that burned inside her. Admiral, he said quietly, they are not evacuating. Civilians are still on the surface. Volkov did not look at him. Her eyes remained fixed on the approaching fleet. In her mind, she saw her daughter's face. Sarah had been 8 years old. She loved drawing pictures of stars. She wanted to be an explorer when she grew up. She died when the Krell bombed her school. There was not enough left of her body to bury. They made their choice, Volkov said. Her voice was like ice. Weapons free, engage. The Retribution opened fire. Plasma lances erupted from the main batteries. Each shot carried enough energy to vaporize a city. The beams crossed space in seconds. Krell shields flared and died. Krell armor melted. Krell ships exploded. The Krell fleet tried to return fire. Their weapons hit the Retribution shields and did nothing. Human shield technology was decades ahead. The Krell might as well have been throwing rocks. Antimatter torpedoes launched next. Each torpedo contained enough antimatter to crack a moon. Dozens of torpedoes streaked toward the Krell formation. When they detonated, space itself seemed to tear. 20 Krell ships vanished in expanding spheres of pure energy. Fleet Commander Vrax screamed orders. His ships scattered. They tried to flank the human vessel. They tried to overwhelm it with numbers. Nothing worked. The Retribution tracked every ship. Its computers calculated firing solutions faster than biological minds could think. Gravitational disruptors activated. These weapons created artificial gravity wells. Krell ships were pulled off course. Hulls crushed under impossible forces. Some ships were torn apart. Others collided with each other. The battle lasted 47 minutes. 300 Krell warships were destroyed. Not damaged, not disabled, destroyed. Debris floated in space where a proud fleet had been. The Retribution had not even been scratched. Captain Morrison stared at the tactical display. He had been in combat before. He had seen ships die. But this was different. This was not a battle. This was an execution. Admiral, he said. His voice shook slightly. The fleet is destroyed. The orbital defenses are offline. They cannot stop us now. Perhaps we could offer them another chance to evacuate. Volkov checked the time. 23 hours and 14 minutes remained. She opened communications to the surface again. You have been given a warning. You have been given time. Use it wisely. There will not be another message. On Krelthar, panic spread. The military commanders who had laughed were dead. Their ships were debris. The civilians realized the human was serious. Evacuation ships began launching. Millions tried to flee, but billions remained. Some refused to believe a single ship could destroy a planet. Others had nowhere to go. Many were too proud to run from a human. The Krell culture valued strength. Running was weakness. Better to die than show fear. 24 hours passed. Volkov looked at Morrison. He could see she wanted him to say something. To tell her not to do this. To give her a reason to show mercy. He said nothing. What could he say? Mercy had not saved her daughter. Commence orbital bombardment, Volkov ordered. The Retribution unleashed hell. Every weapon fired at once. Plasma lances carved trenches across continents. Antimatter torpedoes detonated in the atmosphere, creating firestorms that consumed cities. Kinetic projectiles moving at near light speed struck the surface with the force of nuclear weapons. The planet's crust cracked. Magma erupted from fissures miles wide. The atmosphere caught fire. Oceans boiled away into steam. Mountains were leveled. Cities became molten glass. The bombardment lasted 6 hours. When it stopped, Krelthar no longer existed as a habitable world. The surface was a burning wasteland. The sky was black with ash. Nothing could live there. Nothing would live there for thousands of years. 2 billion Krell had died. Most were civilians who had simply refused to believe. The coalition monitoring stations recorded everything. Across the galaxy, representatives watched in horror. This was not war. This was extermination. Emergency sessions were called. Everyone agreed something had to be done about the humans, but no one could agree on what. Ambassador Thelnax tried to contact Admiral Volkov. The communication was refused. He tried to speak with Ambassador Chen. She answered but looked exhausted. "You have committed a war crime," Thelnax said. He tried to keep his voice steady. 2 billion civilians are dead. The coalition cannot ignore this. Chen nodded slowly. Yes, 2 billion Krell are dead. Do you want to know how many humans the Krell killed before we stopped them? She pulled up a hologram. Names scrolled past. Millions of names. 40 million humans. We gave the Krell a chance to evacuate. Many did. Those who remained made their choice. Where will this end? Thelnax asked. How many worlds will burn before humanity is satisfied? Chen looked directly at him. As many as it takes. The Krell wanted war. Now they have it. They will surrender, or they will cease to exist. Tell your coalition to stay out of our way. The transmission ended. Thelnax sat in his office for a long time. He thought about all the species that had gone to war over the centuries. Most had followed rules. They tried to minimize civilian deaths. They negotiated truces. They showed mercy. Humans did not seem to understand mercy. Or perhaps they understood it too well and had chosen to abandon it. The retribution jumped to its next target. In Krell space, fear began to spread. The humans were coming, and they would show no mercy. The retribution moved through Krell space like death itself. Every 7 days, a new target was selected. Every 7 days, Admiral Volkov sent the same message: evacuate. 24 hours. No exceptions. Some Krell worlds listened. Billions fled in massive evacuation efforts. Ships overloaded with refugees jumped to neutral systems. The Coalition accepted these refugees reluctantly. They had nowhere else to go. Other Krell worlds refused. Pride was ingrained in their culture. Their ancestors had conquered half the galaxy. They would not run from a single human ship. They prepared defenses. They gathered fleets. They waited. The retribution destroyed them all. 6 Krell worlds became wastelands. Infrastructure that took centuries to build was reduced to rubble in hours. Billions of Krell died or became refugees. The mighty empire that had threatened the Coalition for generations was crumbling. War Marshal Kresh watched his empire fall apart. Reports came in constantly. Another world burned. Another fleet destroyed. The humans were unstoppable. More importantly, they were relentless. They did not negotiate. They did not pause. They simply moved from target to target, methodically destroying everything. Kresh called emergency meetings with his commanders. They argued about strategy. Some wanted to mass all remaining forces and overwhelm the human ship. Others suggested surrendering before more worlds died. Kresh rejected both options. Surrender was unthinkable. Death was preferable to shame. The Galactic Coalition could not ignore the situation any longer. Dozens of species demanded intervention. The human destruction violated every law of warfare. Even if the Krell started the conflict, the human response was excessive, barbaric, evil. A coalition fleet was assembled. 20 species contributed ships, 500 vessels in total, not to attack the humans but to force a ceasefire. They would position themselves between the retribution and the next Krell target. Surely the humans would not fire on coalition ships. Ambassador Thelnax commanded the fleet. He did not want this responsibility, but someone had to try to stop the madness. The fleet jumped to the Krell system of Vortan. 3 billion Krell lived there. The retribution was already in orbit, preparing to bombard. Thelnax opened a channel to Admiral Volkov. Her face appeared on the screen. She looked thinner than before. There were dark circles under her eyes, but her expression was still cold, still determined. Admiral Volkov, Thelnax began. The Coalition has decided that this war must end. We are positioning our fleet between you and Vortan. You cannot bombard this world without going through us first. Volkov was silent for a moment. Then she spoke quietly. Too quietly. Ambassador, I warned the Coalition to stay out of this. I told you what would happen if you interfered. Surely you would not fire on Coalition vessels, Thelnax said. We are not your enemy. We are trying to prevent more deaths. You are preventing justice, Volkov replied. The Krell killed my people. They will pay the price. Anyone who defends them shares their guilt. Captain Morrison stood beside Volkov on the bridge. He leaned close and whispered urgently. The Coalition was not their enemy. They were trying to help. Attacking them would make humanity enemies with the entire galaxy. Volkov ignored him. She gave an order to her weapons officer. Target the moon, she said. The small one. Show them what will happen if they do not move. Vortan had 3 moons. The smallest was barely 200 kilometers across. It was uninhabited. Just a ball of rock and ice. The retribution fired a single gravitational disruptor at full power. The moon shattered. Not cracked, not damaged, shattered. It broke apart into thousands of pieces. The debris field spread out, glowing hot from the energy release. Where a moon had existed, there was now only dust and fragments. Thelnax watched in horror. The power required to destroy a moon was staggering. If the humans fired that weapon at the Coalition fleet, they would all die. 500 ships meant nothing against that kind of power. Volkov spoke again. Her voice was emotionless. You have 1 hour to clear this system. After that, anything in my way will be destroyed. Choose carefully, Ambassador. The transmission ended. Thelnax looked at his fleet commanders. They all showed the same expression. Fear. The humans were not bluffing. They would destroy the entire coalition fleet without hesitation. Thelnax gave the order to withdraw. The coalition fleet jumped away. They had failed. 3 billion Krell on Vorton would die, and the coalition could do nothing to stop it. As the coalition ships retreated, Thelnax sent a final message to Volkov. It was personal, not official. Admiral, I understand your pain. I understand your anger. But this path leads nowhere good. You are becoming the very thing you are fighting against. A destroyer of worlds. A killer of innocence. Is this what your daughter would have wanted? Volkov did not respond immediately. When she did, her voice was so quiet Morrison could barely hear it. My daughter is dead. She wanted to grow up. She wanted to explore the stars. She wanted to meet aliens and make friends. The Krell took that from her. They took that from 40 million humans. What they want no longer matters. What I want no longer matters. Only justice matters. The transmission ended. Vorton burned 6 hours later. In the Krell Empire, panic turned to chaos. The government started to fragment. Some provinces declared independence and tried to negotiate with humanity separately. Others doubled down on resistance. Civil war seemed likely. War Marshal Kresh saw his power slipping away. The empire his ancestors built was collapsing, all because of one human ship, one grieving mother who refused to stop. He made a decision. If he was going to fall, he would take the humans with him. Kresh gathered what remained of the Krell military. 2,000 ships. Every vessel that could still fly. Every soldier who could still fight. He would not attack the Retribution. That ship was too powerful. Instead, he would strike at the heart of humanity itself. He would attack Earth. The plan was desperate. The human homeworld was surely defended, but maybe, just maybe, if the Krell threw everything they had at it, they could damage it. They could kill millions of humans. They could make the humans feel the same pain they had inflicted. The Krell fleet jumped to human space. They headed directly for the Sol system. Earth was waiting. Captain Morrison was in a meeting with other officers when the alert came through. A massive Krell fleet had appeared on the edge of the Sol system. They were heading for Earth at maximum speed. The Retribution was 3 days away at best. Earth would be on its own. Morrison felt ice in his stomach. If the Krell reached Earth, millions more would die. Maybe billions. The orbital defenses were strong, but 2,000 warships were a lot. He looked at Admiral Volkov, expecting to see panic. Instead, she looked almost sad. The Krell are fools, she said quietly. They think Earth is undefended because the Retribution is here. They are about to learn why we only sent one ship. Morrison did not understand at first. Then the reports started coming in. The Krell fleet never reached Earth. They encountered humanity's defense grid in the outer solar system. Thousands of automated weapons platforms, minefields that stretched across millions of kilometers, defense stations that made the Retribution look small, and 12 more battleships. Smaller than the Retribution, but each one still more powerful than anything the Krell possessed. The Battle of Sol lasted 30 minutes. 2,000 Krell ships were destroyed before they got within 1 billion kilometers of Earth. Not one human vessel was lost. War Marshal Kresh died when his flagship exploded. His last transmission was a curse against humanity and everything they represented. Across the galaxy, everyone who had been watching realized the same thing. The Retribution was not humanity's only weapon. It was just the weapon they chose to send. If they wanted to, humans could field a fleet that would crush the entire coalition. The question became, what would stop them? After the Battle of Sol, the Krell Empire fell silent. No more transmissions, no more threats, no more defiance. The loss of their entire attack fleet and War Marshal Kresh had broken something fundamental in their society. The Retribution arrived at Krell Prime 3 days later. The planet hung in space like a jewel. It was beautiful. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. 50 billion Krell called it home. It was the oldest world in their empire. Every Krell traced their ancestry back to this planet. Admiral Volkov stood on the bridge and looked at it. Captain Morrison stood beside her. He had been with her through every battle. He had watched her destroy 6 worlds. He had said nothing because what could he say? The Krell had started this war with mass murder. But now, looking at Krell Prime, he could not stay silent. Admiral, he said quietly, 50 billion civilians. Most of them had nothing to do with the attacks on our colonies. They are families, children, people just trying to live their lives. Volkov did not look at him. Her eyes remained fixed on the planet below. Our colonists were families too, she said. They were children. They were trying to live their lives. The Krell showed them no mercy. I know, Morrison replied, but if we destroy Krell Prime, we become exactly what they are. Murderers, monsters. Is that what we want humanity to be remembered as? For the first time in weeks, Volkov turned to look at him. Her face was gaunt. She had lost weight. The grief and rage that drove her were consuming her from the inside. I stopped caring what people think of me the day my daughter died, she said. But you are right about one thing. The Krell need to understand what will happen if they ever attack humanity again. A demonstration is required. She turned to the communications officer. Open a channel to the surface. All frequencies. I want everyone to hear this. Across Krell Prime, every screen, every radio, every device received the message. Admiral Volkov's face appeared. The Krell who saw her would never forget what they witnessed. Her expression was not angry, not hateful. It was simply tired. Empty. This is Admiral Elena Volkov of the United Nations Space Command. I am here to offer the Krell Empire terms of surrender. These terms are non-negotiable. You will accept them, or Krell Prime will burn like your other worlds, she paused. On the surface, billions of Krell held their breath. First, the Krell Empire will surrender unconditionally. All military forces will stand down immediately. Second, the Krell will pay reparations to humanity. The amount will be determined by human courts. Third, the Krell Empire will be disarmed. All weapons of mass destruction will be destroyed. Your fleet will be reduced to system defense vessels only. Another pause, longer this time. You have 6 hours to transmit your acceptance. If I do not receive confirmation by then, Krell Prime will be reduced to ash. You have seen what I can do. You know I am not bluffing. Choose wisely. The transmission ended. On Krell Prime, chaos erupted. The provisional government that had formed after Kresh's death held an emergency meeting. Some members wanted to refuse. Death with honor was better than surrender. But they were outvoted. The majority understood that this was not about honor anymore. This was about survival. If they refused, 50 billion Krell would die. The species might go extinct. Pride was not worth that price, but there was a problem. The government had only partial control. Military commanders loyal to Kresh's ideology still held power in some regions. They sent a message saying they would never surrender. They called for resistance. They prepared to fight. 3 hours into the deadline, the provisional government realized they could not stop the extremists in time. If those commanders did not stand down, Volkov would destroy the planet, all of it. Everyone would die because a few fools could not accept defeat. The solution was brutal. The provisional government sent their own forces to attack the holdouts. Krell fought Krell in the streets. Bombs exploded in military installations. Thousands died, but it worked. The extremist commanders were killed or captured. 5 hours and 40 minutes after Volkov's ultimatum, the transmission came through. The provisional government of the Krell Empire accepted all terms. They surrendered unconditionally. The war was over. On the Retribution Bridge, the crew erupted in cheers. They had won. Humanity was safe. The Krell would never threaten them again. Captain Morrison felt relief wash over him. It was finally over. But Admiral Volkov did not celebrate. She simply nodded and gave an order. Maintain orbit. Full alert status. The Retribution will remain here for 3 months. If the Krell break any term of the surrender, we finish what we started. 3 months passed. The Retribution stayed in orbit above Krell Prime. Its weapons were always charged. Its shields were always active. The Krell looked up at it every day and remembered what would happen if they broke their word. During those 3 months, the Krell dismantled their empire. Weapons were destroyed. Shipyards were shut down. Military academies closed. The proud warrior culture that had defined them for thousands of years was being torn apart. They did it because the alternative was extinction. The Galactic Coalition watched everything happen. They had been unable to stop the human rampage. Now they saw the results. The Krell Empire was broken. 6 worlds were lifeless wastelands. Billions were dead or displaced. Humanity had achieved what the Coalition could not do in 10,000 years. But the Coalition was not grateful. They were terrified. Emergency sessions were called. 12 races formally proposed that humanity be designated as a hostile species. Sanctions were suggested. Trade embargoes. Diplomatic isolation. Even military action was discussed, though no one wanted to actually fight the humans. Ambassador Thelnax attended these meetings. He listened to his colleagues condemn humanity as monsters, war criminals, a threat to galactic peace. He understood their fear. He shared it. But he also understood something else. He requested permission to speak. The council granted it. The humans committed terrible acts, Thelnax said. They destroyed worlds. They killed billions. They showed no mercy. But let us not forget how this started. The Krell attacked human colonies without provocation. They massacred 40 million civilians. They laughed about it. Some council members tried to interrupt. Thelnax raised his hand for silence. The coalition did nothing. We offered protection, but we did not punish the Krell. We did not even condemn them. The humans had to defend themselves. Yes, their response was excessive. Yes, they went too far. But can we honestly say we would have done better if 50 of our worlds had been attacked? The chamber fell silent. Thelnax continued. Humanity has shown us what happens when you attack a species from a death world. A species that evolved by fighting for survival every single day. A species that learned long ago that mercy to enemies is death for your children. We can condemn them. We can isolate them. But I suggest we do something else instead. What would you suggest? Another ambassador asked. Leave them alone. Thelnax said simply. Never attack humanity. Never threaten them. Never give them reason to build more ships like the Retribution. Because if we do, they will not stop until we are all extinct. The vote was close, but Thelnax won. The coalition would impose economic sanctions on humanity. They would condemn the attacks publicly, but they would not take military action. They would not risk provoking the humans further. When the Retribution finally left Krell Prime and returned to human space, Admiral Volkov was called to Earth. She expected to be celebrated as a hero. Instead, she faced a tribunal. Human leaders were divided. Some saw her as necessary. She had protected humanity when no one else would. Others saw her as a war criminal who had tarnished humanity's reputation forever. The tribunal lasted 6 months. In the end, Volkov was found not guilty of war crimes under human law. The Krell had been warned. Those who stayed made their choice. But she was forced into retirement. The Retribution would have a new commander. On the day of her retirement, Captain Morrison visited her apartment. She was packing her belongings. She looked older now. The fire that had driven her was gone. Only ashes remained. Was it worth it? Morrison asked. Volkov thought about it for a long time before answering. My daughter is still dead. Nothing I did brought her back. But no one will ever attack humanity like that again. Children on our colonies will grow up safe because the galaxy knows what happens if they threaten us. She looked at Morrison. I became a monster so they could sleep peacefully. Yes, it was worth it. Morrison left without another word. He did not know if he agreed with her. He did not know if what they had done was right. But he knew one thing for certain. The galaxy would never forget. And they would never forgive. Humanity was safe. But they were also alone. 5 years passed. The galaxy settled into an uneasy peace. The Krell Empire remained broken. They had rebuilt some infrastructure, but they would never again be the power they once were. Their warrior culture was gone. A generation of Krell children grew up learning that violence leads to extinction. Humanity remained isolated. The economic sanctions were still in place. Most species refused to trade with humans. Diplomatic relations were minimal. When human ships entered coalition space, they were tracked constantly. Everyone wanted to know where the dangerous species was at all times. The Retribution and its 12 sister ships remained in service. They patrolled human space constantly. Their weapons were always ready. The galaxy had learned what happened when you attacked humanity. The humans wanted to make sure no one forgot. Admiral Volkov lived quietly in retirement. She had a small apartment overlooking a lake. She spent her days reading and walking. She rarely spoke to anyone. She had become famous, but not in the way she expected. Half of humanity saw her as a hero. The other half saw her as a reminder of humanity's capacity for evil. She kept a picture of her daughter on her desk. Sarah's smiling face looked out at her every day. Sometimes Volkov wondered what Sarah would think of what she had done. Would she be proud? Would she be horrified? Volkov would never know. Then something changed. Something that would test everything humanity had become. The Devourers arrived. No one knew where they came from. They appeared at the edge of the galaxy and began moving inward. They were not a species in the traditional sense. They were machines, or perhaps biological organisms that had merged with machines. No one could tell. What everyone knew was that the Devourers consumed everything. They landed on planets and stripped them bare. Every resource was harvested. Every structure was broken down. Every living thing was killed and processed. Within days, thriving worlds became empty husks. The Devourers moved fast. They had thousands of ships, maybe millions. Their technology was advanced beyond anything the galaxy had seen. Coalition fleets that tried to stop them were destroyed effortlessly. 3 coalition worlds fell in the first month. 10 more in the second month. The rate was accelerating. Projections showed the entire galaxy could be consumed within 5 years. Ambassador Thelnax was part of the Emergency War Council. He listened as military commanders reported disaster after disaster. Every strategy failed. Every weapon was ineffective. The Devourers were unstoppable. Someone made a suggestion, a terrible, desperate suggestion. They needed humanity's help. The room erupted in argument. Some species refused to even consider it. Humanity was dangerous, unpredictable, violent. Others pointed out that humanity was also powerful. If anyone could fight the Devourers, it was them. Thelnax was chosen to make the request. He traveled to human space for the first time in 5 years. His ship was escorted by 3 human cruisers. They did not trust the Coalition any more than the Coalition trusted them. The meeting was held on a neutral station. Human diplomats listened as Thelnax explained the situation. The Devourers were consuming the galaxy. The Coalition needed help. They were asking humanity to deploy their battle fleet. The lead human negotiator was Ambassador Chen. She had aged in 5 years. Her hair was gray now. She listened patiently to Thelnax's plea. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair. "The Coalition condemned us for defending ourselves," Chen said. "You imposed sanctions. You isolated us. You called us monsters and war criminals. Now you want our help?" Thelnax nodded slowly. He had expected this. He had no right to ask for anything. But billions of lives were at stake. "Yes," he said simply. "We were wrong to abandon you. We should have helped when the Krell attacked. We should have understood your response. We failed you. But the Devourers do not care about politics. They will consume human worlds just as readily as ours. This threat requires all of us to work together." Chen was silent for a long moment. Then she made humanity's demand. "Humanity will help. But we have conditions. First, all sanctions against us are lifted immediately. Second, we receive full pardons for all actions during the Krell War. Third, the Coalition will publicly acknowledge that the Krell attacks justified our response. Fourth, humanity receives a permanent seat on the Coalition Council with full voting rights." Some of Thelnax's advisors protested. The terms were too steep. They were essentially rewarding war crimes, but Thelnax silenced them. They had no choice. The galaxy was dying. "Agreed," he said. "All of it. Just please help us." Chen nodded. She sent a message to Human Military Command. Within hours, the mobilization began. The Retribution and its sister ships were prepared for deployment. Additional warships were activated. Humanity was going to war again. Admiral James Morrison commanded the human fleet now. He had been promoted after Volkov's retirement. But for this mission, he made a request. He wanted Volkov to come out of retirement and serve as his senior advisor. She knew war better than anyone. Morrison traveled to her apartment personally. He knocked on her door and waited. When Volkov answered, she looked surprised to see him. "James," she said, "what are you doing here?" He explained the situation. The Devourers. The Coalition's plea for help. The deployment of the human fleet. And his request for her to join them. Volkov listened without interrupting. When he finished, she shook her head. "I am done with war," she said. "I did what I had to do, but I will not go back out there." "The galaxy needs the monster again," Morrison said quietly. "They need someone who knows how to win no matter the cost." "That is you." Volkov was quiet for a long time. She looked at the picture of her daughter on her desk. She thought about all the people who would die if the Devourers were not stopped. Children like Sarah. Innocent people just trying to live. "We became monsters so our children would not have to," she said finally, "so that children across the galaxy could sleep safely. The species that condemned us are now begging for our protection. Do you see the irony? I do, Morrison replied. But those children still need protecting, whether their parents appreciate it or not. Volkov smiled sadly. It was the first time Morrison had seen her smile in 5 years. You have learned well, she said. Fine, I will come. But only as an advisor. You are the admiral now. This is your war to fight. They traveled to the Retribution together. The crew welcomed Volkov back with respect and caution. Everyone remembered what she had done, what she was capable of. She walked through the ship she had commanded and felt the weight of memory. The human fleet jumped to Coalition space. 13 massive battleships, dozens of support vessels, thousands of fighters. It was the largest military force humanity had ever deployed. And it was still dwarfed by the Devourer swarm. The first battle was brutal. The Devourers were stronger than expected. Their shields absorbed plasma lances. Their armor withstood antimatter torpedoes. Human ships took damage for the first time. Crews died, but humans were adaptable. They analyzed Devourer technology. They modified their weapons. They changed tactics. Slowly they began to win. The tide turned. Over the next year, human forces pushed the Devourers back. It was not easy. It cost lives. But humanity had something the Devourers did not understand. They fought not just for survival, but for redemption. They fought to prove they could protect others, not just destroy enemies. The human fleet saved 14 coalition worlds. They evacuated billions of civilians ahead of Devourer attacks. They held defensive lines while other species fled. They did everything the coalition had once accused them of being incapable of doing. They showed mercy. They showed restraint. They showed honor. Ambassador Thelnax watched from Coalition Command. He saw human ships sacrifice themselves to protect civilian transports. He saw human soldiers die defending alien colonies. He finally understood what Admiral Volkov had tried to tell him 5 years ago. Humanity had not become monsters because they enjoyed violence. They became monsters because they had to, because no one else would, because someone had to be willing to do terrible things so that innocence could survive. After a year of fighting, the Devourers were pushed back to the edge of the galaxy. They had been stopped. The galaxy was saved. The Coalition held a ceremony to honor the human forces. Every species sent representatives. Medals were awarded. Speeches were made. The galaxy expressed gratitude. But when the ceremony ended, the sanctions were not fully lifted. Some species still refused to trade with humans. The council seat was granted, but with limited voting rights. The promises made in desperation were being walked back, now that the danger had passed. Admiral Morrison stood with Volkov on the bridge of the Retribution as they prepared to return home. He was angry. The Coalition had used them and then betrayed them again. They will never accept us, he said bitterly. We saved their lives and they still see us as monsters. Volkov looked out at the stars. After a moment, she spoke. They fear us because they know what we are capable of. That fear keeps them honest. It keeps them from attacking each other. It keeps the peace. We are the monster in the dark that makes everyone behave. Is that not worth something? At what cost? Morrison asked. We will always be alone, always feared, never trusted. The stars burned cold in the void as Admiral Kreith stood on the bridge of his flagship. His crystalline body caught the light from distant suns, throwing rainbow patterns across the metal walls. Behind him, 1,000 Velkoth warriors worked, at their stations. Their movements were perfect. Every action matched exactly with the others. They moved like one giant mind controlling many bodies. Kreith looked at the view screen. Below them, the planet Zerion spun slowly. Its blue oceans and green lands looked peaceful. But peace would not last long. The Velkoth Empire had come to claim another world. All ships report status, Kreith commanded. His voice echoed through the communication channels to every vessel in his fleet. 200 ships floated in perfect formation around Zerion. Each ship was exactly where it should be. No mistakes, no disorder. This was how the Velkoth fought wars. Admiral, said Commander Vextar, stepping forward. The planet's defense fleet has been destroyed. 15 ships. They lasted 12 minutes. Kreith nodded. 12 minutes was longer than most. The aliens of Zerion had tried to fight. They had small, fast ships with energy weapons. But speed meant nothing when facing the Velkoth. Organization always won against chaos. Open communication channels to all inhabited worlds in this sector, Kreeth ordered. It is time for another lesson. The main screen changed. Instead of showing Xerion, it now displayed dozens of alien faces, bird-like Syrians with bright feathers, nautiloids with their large wet eyes, Chitauri with their insect features. All of them looked afraid. Fear was good. Fear made surrender easier. Kreeth walked closer to the screen. His crystal shell reflected the lights, making him appear even more frightening. I am Admiral Kreeth of the Velkoth Empire. You have witnessed the fall of Xerion. This is what happens to worlds that resist us. One of the Syrian leaders spoke up. His feathers were shaking. Admiral, please. Our worlds pose no threat to your empire. We are peaceful traders. We have families, children. Your weakness is noted, Kreeth interrupted. The Velkoth Empire does not negotiate with the weak. We are the perfect warriors. We evolved for war while you evolved for trade and art and other useless things. No species in this galaxy understands warfare like we do. The Admiral moved to the center of the bridge. Every Velkoth warrior stopped, working, and turned to face him. They all moved at exactly the same time. It was beautiful and terrifying. Look at us, Kreeth continued, spreading his arms wide. We think as one mind. We move as one body. We fight as one weapon. When we attack, every shot is perfectly aimed. Every ship moves to the right place at the right time. We do not make mistakes because we do not think like individuals. We are evolution's answer to war itself. A nautiloid representative tried to speak. Admiral, surely we can reach some agreement. Our worlds have resources. We can trade. You still do not understand, Kreeth said, his voice growing harder. We do not want your resources. We want your submission. The galaxy will belong to the Velkoth Empire because we are the only species that truly commands war. Submit now, and your people will live as our servants. Resist, and they will join the void. The communication ended. Kreeth had made his point. Soon the surrender messages would begin arriving. They always did. Meanwhile, far beyond the edge of the Andorian sector, a small human ship drifted through space. The UES Busan was not a warship. It was a research vessel, designed to study new star systems and look for planets that humans might one day call home. Its crew of 35 people had been traveling for 8 months, mapping unknown regions of the galaxy. Captain Lee Minho sat in his command chair, reading reports from his science teams. At 42 years old, he had spent most of his adult life in space. He had gray hair starting to show at his temples, and kind eyes that had seen many wonders among the stars. But today, something was different. Captain, called Lieutenant Kim Daeho from the communication station. I'm picking up a transmission. It's being broadcast on all frequencies. Minho looked up from his datapad. From where? The Andorian sector, sir. About 15 light years. From our position. Put it on the main screen. The bridge of the Busan was small compared to military vessels. Only 6 people worked there during normal shifts. Besides Minho and Daeho, there was Ensign Park Nari at the science station, Lieutenant Commander Yoon Jiwoo at engineering controls, and 2 junior officers managing navigation and sensors. The transmission began playing. Everyone on the bridge watched as the crystal-covered alien appeared on their screen. They listened to Admiral Kreeth's words about perfect warriors and submission. They saw the fear in the alien representatives' faces. When the transmission ended, the bridge was quiet for a long moment. Has Earth ever made contact with any of these species? Asked Park Nari. She was young, only 26, and this was her first deep space mission. No, Minho replied. We've never traveled this far into the galactic core before. These are all first contacts for humanity. Yoon Jiwoo spoke from her engineering station. Captain, should we move away from this sector? If these Velkoth are as dangerous as they claim, no, Minho said firmly. We need more information. Daeho, can you intercept any other communications from that area? Lieutenant Daeho worked at his controls for several minutes. His face grew more serious as he found more signals. Sir, I'm reading multiple surrender transmissions. At least 6 different species have agreed to Velkoth terms in the last hour. What kind of terms? Minho asked. Complete submission, surrender of all military forces, Velkoth governors to be placed on all major worlds. Daho paused, reading more data. Captain, it looks like this empire has conquered 15 star systems in just 3 months. Park Nari turned from her science station. Sir, I'm detecting weapon signatures from the battle near Zarion. The Velkoth ships use coordinated energy beams and kinetic missiles. Their tactics appear to be based on overwhelming numerical superiority and perfect timing. Perfect timing, Minho repeated thoughtfully. That suggests they plan every move in advance. Yes, sir. The attack patterns show no variation, no improvisation. Everything follows preset formations. Commander Yoon Ji-woo stood up from her station. She was the oldest member of the bridge crew at 51 and had served in the Earth Navy before joining the Exploration Service. Captain, with respect, this isn't our fight. We're explorers, not soldiers. Minho nodded. You're right, Commander. But we may be the only humans in this region of space. Earth needs to know what's happening out here. Sir, Daho interrupted. I'm receiving another transmission. This one is directed specifically at us. Everyone turned to look at the communication officer. At us? Minho asked. How is that possible? Unknown, sir. But it's definitely targeted at our position and using our communication protocols. Put it through. The screen showed a different alien this time. This one had blue-green scales and large, intelligent eyes. The creature looked exhausted and afraid. Unknown vessel, the alien said. This is Governor Thessian of the Zarian colony. We detected your ship on our long-range sensors before. The alien's voice broke for a moment. Before our world fell. If you can hear this message, please send word to any spacefaring civilizations you know. Tell them about the Velkoth. Tell them what happened here. They claim to command war itself, and no one has found a way to stop them. The transmission ended with coordinates for several refugee ships that had escaped Xarian's destruction. Captain. Minho stood up and walked to the main viewing port. Outside, the stars looked the same as always. But he knew that somewhere among those distant lights, an empire was growing. An empire that believed it had mastered warfare. Nari, he said without turning around, analyze everything we've intercepted about Velkoth military tactics. I want a complete report. Yes, sir. Daho, contact those refugee ships. If any survivors are willing to talk, I want to hear their stories. Understood, Captain. Ji-woo, plot a course back toward Earth space. Maximum sustainable speed. The engineering commander looked surprised. Sir, that will take us 11 months at best. Minho turned back to face his crew. Then we better send a priority message ahead of us. Earth Fleet Command needs to know about the Velkoth Empire. They need to know about species that claim to command war. What should the message say, Captain? Asked Lieutenant Daho. Minho thought for a moment. He looked again at the screen where Governor Thessian's desperate face had appeared. He thought about the fear in the alien representatives' voices. He considered the cold confidence of Admiral Kreeth. Tell Earth Command that we've discovered a military empire that has conquered 15 star systems using superior tactics and organization. Tell them the Velkoth believe they are the galaxy's perfect warriors. And tell them... Minho paused. Tell them that these aliens have never encountered humans before. Over the next few hours, the crew of the Busan worked to gather as much information as possible. They contacted 3 refugee ships and spoke with survivors from different worlds. The stories were all similar. The Velkoth would arrive with overwhelming numbers. They would demonstrate their perfect coordination and tactical superiority. Then they would offer terms: surrender or die. Most species surrendered. The few that chose to fight were destroyed quickly and efficiently. The Velkoth never seemed to lose ships in these battles. Their formations were too perfect. Their Tia. 6 days after Captain Lee Minho sent his message, Admiral Choi Hyunwoo sat in his office on Luna Station, reading the transmission for the 3rd time. Rain fell against the massive viewing windows that looked out over the lunar surface. Earth hung in the black sky like a blue marble, peaceful and beautiful. But the Admiral's mind was not on peaceful things. Hyunwoo was 63 years old and had commanded Earth Fleet for 8 years. His gray hair was cut short in military style, and his dark eyes showed the weight of many difficult decisions. He had fought in the Martian independence wars 15 years ago. He had seen what happened when humans went to war. Now, apparently, war might be coming to them. "Computer, connect me to General Nam Soo-jin and Dr. Kang Min-ji," he said aloud. Within minutes, 2 figures appeared on his holographic display. General Nam Soo-jin was at the Marine Training Center on Europa. She was younger than Hyunwoo, only 45, but she had more actual combat experience than anyone else in Earth's military. Her black hair was pulled back tightly, and her uniform was perfect as always. Dr. Kang Min-ji appeared from her laboratory on Earth. At 38, she was the leading expert on alien biology and psychology. She had studied every form of life humans had encountered in their expansion into space. Her workspace behind her was filled with star charts and biological data displays. "You've both read Captain Minho's report?" Admiral Hyunwoo asked. "Yes, sir," General Soo-jin replied immediately. "The Velkoth Empire represents a clear threat to human expansion and potentially to Earth itself." Dr. Min-ji nodded more slowly. "Admiral, the psychological profile is concerning. These Velkoth appear to have evolved as a hive mind species. Individual creativity has been replaced by collective coordination. That makes them extremely effective at conventional warfare." "Conventional warfare," Hyunwoo repeated. "What about unconventional warfare?" "That's harder to assess without more data," Dr. Min-ji said. "But hive mind species typically have difficulty adapting to unexpected situations. They plan perfectly, but they don't improvise well." General Soo-jin leaned forward. "Admiral, I recommend immediate military deployment to the Andorian sector. We should assess the threat level directly and potentially make contact with surviving allied species." "With what forces?" Hyunwoo asked. "Our nearest ships are months away from that region. The Sol is completing its shakedown cruise in the Centauri system," Soo-jin replied. "Captain Shin Taehyung's crew has been training on the new quantum weapon systems. The ship could reach the Andorian sector in 3 weeks. Dr. Min-ji looked concerned. "General, sending one ship against an empire that has conquered 40 worlds seems exactly like something humans would do," Soo-jin interrupted. "Doctor, with respect, you study aliens. I study war. These Velkoth have been successful because they fight predictable enemies with predictable tactics. They've never faced humans." Admiral Hyunwoo had been quiet, thinking. Now he spoke. "Dr. Min-ji, in your opinion, what would happen if we tried to negotiate with this empire?" Based on the psychological profile, negotiation would be seen as weakness. The Velkoth appear to believe that military superiority is the only meaningful form of communication. They would likely demand immediate surrender. And if we surrendered, humanity would become a servant species. Our creativity and independence would be seen as dangerous. They would probably try to change our society to match their hive mind structure. General Soo-jin made a sound of disgust. "That will never happen." "Then we're looking at eventual conflict," Hyunwoo said. "The question is whether we engage now on our terms or wait for them to find Earth." The 3 leaders sat in silence for a moment. Outside the Admiral's window, Earth continued its slow rotation. Somewhere on that blue world, 3 billion humans lived their lives. Most of them had never heard of the Velkoth Empire. Most of them had no idea that their future might depend on decisions made in the next few hours. "Tell me about the Sol," Admiral Hyunwoo said finally. General Soo-jin straightened. "It's our most advanced battleship. Quantum torpedo systems, adaptive AI targeting, enhanced shielding. But more importantly, Captain Taehyung's crew represents our best tactical thinking." "How so?" "They're trained in asymmetric warfare. Instead of fighting like every other species, formations, predetermined tactics, standard procedures, they're taught to improvise. Every simulation they run is different. Every battle plan changes based on real-time conditions." Dr. Min-ji looked interested. "That sounds like the opposite of Velkoth methodology." "Exactly," Soo-jin said. "The Velkoth perfect their tactics by repetition. Humans perfect their tactics by variation. Admiral Hyunwoo stood up and walked to his window. Earth looked so peaceful from here. If we send the Soul, what would their mission be? Initially reconnaissance, General Soo-jin replied. Assess Velkoth capabilities, make contact with refugee populations, gather intelligence. And if they're discovered? Then Captain Tae-hyung improvises. The Admiral turned back to face the holographic displays. Dr. Minji, what's your assessment of the risks? Hi, Admiral, but the alternative may be worse. If the Velkoth continue expanding, they will eventually reach human space. When that happens, they'll arrive with the combined resources of hundreds of conquered worlds. Better to face them now, while they only control 40 worlds? Better to face them before they know we exist. Admiral Hyunwoo made his decision. General Soo-jin, contact Captain Tae-hyung. The Soul is to depart for the Andorian sector immediately. Mission parameters, gather intelligence, assess threat level, and... He paused. And demonstrate human capabilities if necessary. Understood, sir. Dr. Minji, I want a complete xenological profile of the Velkoth sent to the Soul. Everything we can deduce from Captain Minho's data. I'll have it ready within 12 hours. 2 days later, Captain Shin Tae-hyung stood on the bridge of the UES Soul as it prepared to depart Centauri Station. He was 35 years old and had been commanding starships for 6 years. Unlike many military officers, he had studied history and philosophy before joining the Navy. He believed that understanding why humans fought was more important than understanding how they fought. The Soul was beautiful and deadly. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, with lines that seemed to flow like water frozen in motion. The ship was 800 meters long and carried a crew of 200, but it was not the size that made it special. It was the technology and the people who used it. All stations report ready, Captain, said Commander Ojina, his first officer. She was 32 and had served with Tae-hyung for 3 years. They worked together like dancers who had practiced the same routine many times. Engineering reports quantum drive ready for jump, called Lieutenant Han Wubin from the weapons station. He was only 28 but had top scores in every tactical simulation Earth fleet had ever created. Navigation has our course laid in, reported Chief Petty Officer Lim So-young. She managed the Soul's shield and sensor systems with an expertise that bordered on instinctive. Marines are secured for departure, added Sergeant Major Bae Dong-yun over the communication system. His voice carried the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. Captain Tae-hyung looked around his bridge. These were good people. Smart people. People who could think for themselves and work together without losing their individuality. The Velkoth had never faced anything like them. Take us out, Chief Lim. The Soul moved away from Centauri Station like a shadow sliding across the stars. Within an hour, they were far enough from the star's gravity well to engage their quantum drive. Jump in 3, 2, 1, engage. Space twisted around them, and the Soul vanished from the Centauri system. During the 3-week journey to the Andorian sector, the crew studied everything Earth Command had learned about the Velkoth Empire. They ran simulations based on the tactical data Captain Minho had gathered. They practiced scenarios that conventional military doctrine said were impossible. Dr. Minji's xenological report made for interesting reading. The Velkoth had evolved on a world where cooperation was necessary for survival. Over millions of years, they had developed a collective consciousness that allowed perfect coordination between individuals. This made them incredibly effective at large-scale operations, but it also made them vulnerable in ways they didn't realize. The key insight, Captain Tae-hyung explained to his senior staff during a briefing, is that they can't think outside their established patterns. When we watch their battle recordings, every engagement follows the same basic structure. They arrive in formation. They demonstrate overwhelming superiority. They offer surrender terms. If the terms are refused, they attack with predetermined tactics. What happens if we don't follow their script? Asked Commander Ojina. That's what we're going to find out. Lieutenant Han Wubin was studying weapon data on his personal tablet. Captain, their ships appear to be heavily armed, but not particularly well shielded. They rely on not being hit rather than surviving hits. Meaning, their tactics assume they can control the range and timing of combat. If someone forced them into close-range fighting, they might not be prepared for it. Tae-hyung finished. Good observation, what else? Chief Lim So-young spoke up. Sir, their communication systems seem to be constantly active. They coordinate everything in real time. If we could disrupt those communications, the soul dropped out of quantum space at the edge of the Zerion system, like a ghost materializing from the void. Captain Shin Tae-hyung stood on his bridge, watching the tactical display update with new information. What he saw made his jaw tighten. 200 Velkoth ships hung in perfect formation around the planet Zerion. Their crystalline hulls caught the light from the system's star, creating a spectacular display of reflected rainbows. It would have been beautiful if it weren't so menacing. Sensor sweep complete, Captain, reported Chief Lim So-young. I'm reading massive energy signatures from the Velkoth fleet. They appear to be preparing for a final planetary bombardment. Any signs of the planet's defenders? Asked Commander Ojina. Negative. The orbital defense platforms have been destroyed. I'm detecting debris from approximately 15 ships in decaying orbits. Captain Tae-hyung studied the display. The Velkoth formation was exactly what Dr. Minji's report had predicted. Ships arranged in precise geometric patterns, each vessel maintaining perfect distance from its neighbors. No wasted movement, no redundancy. It was militarily efficient and completely predictable. Lieutenant Wubin, analysis of their weapons systems? The young tactical officer worked at his station for several minutes before responding. Sir, they're using coordinated energy beams and kinetic missile systems. The interesting thing is that every ship fires at exactly the same moment. They're not targeting individual threats. They're creating overlapping fields of destruction. Overlapping fields, Tae-hyung repeated thoughtfully. That suggests they expect their enemies to maintain formation as well. Yes, sir. Their tactics assume the enemy will fight conventionally. Sergeant Major Bae Dong-hyun's voice came over the communication system from the marine deck. Captain, are we going to help the people on that planet? Tae-hyung looked at the planet on his screen. Zerion was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents. Somewhere down there, millions of beings were waiting to discover their fate. The Velkoth would either accept their surrender or destroy their civilization. That's exactly what we're going to do, Sergeant Major, but not in the way they expect. The captain turned to his crew. All right, people. We're about to make first contact with a species that believes it commands war itself. They've never lost a battle. They've never encountered resistance they couldn't overcome. Today that changes. Sir, Commander Ojina said quietly, there are 200 of them and one of us, which means they'll underestimate us. Tae-hyung smiled grimly. Chief Lim, take us closer. I want to decloak right in the middle of their formation. Sir? Chief Lim looked surprised. That would put us in weapons range of 50 ships simultaneously. Exactly. They won't expect anyone to be that aggressive. Their perfect formation becomes a trap if we're already inside it. The soul moved forward under its cloaking field. The advanced stealth system was one of humanity's most closely guarded technologies. It didn't just hide the ship from sensors. It made it functionally invisible until the crew chose to reveal themselves. As they approached the Velkoth fleet, Captain Tae-hyung opened a channel to all stations. This is the captain. In approximately 5 minutes, we're going to announce humanity's presence to the galaxy. Every one of you represents 3 billion humans who have never backed down from a fight. Show these aliens what that means. The soul slipped between the Velkoth ships like a shadow moving through a crystal garden. The alien vessels maintained their perfect spacing, unaware that a human warship was now positioned at the exact center of their formation. We're in position, Captain, Chief Lim reported. Decloak us. The soul suddenly appeared on every Velkoth sensor screen simultaneously. Admiral Kreeth, who had been reviewing surrender terms from 3 more species, looked up in shock as his officers reported the impossible. Admiral, called one of his subordinates, an unknown vessel has appeared inside our formation. Impossible. Our sensors monitor all space within 10 light hours. Nothing could approach without detection. Sir, it's right there. The Velkoth officer pointed at the tactical display. A sleek, dark ship hung in space exactly where their formation was weakest. Admiral Kreith studied the new vessel. Its design was unlike anything in Velkoth databases. The hull seemed to flow like liquid metal, and the weapon emplacements were positioned in patterns that made no tactical sense according to established military doctrine. Scan the ship. Identify its species and capabilities. Sir, the scanning is being blocked. The vessel appears to be using some form of adaptive shielding. Then we will ask them directly. Admiral Kreith activated the fleet-wide communication system. Unknown vessel, you have entered Velkoth space during military operations. Identify yourself and state your intentions. On the Seoul's bridge, Captain Taehyung received the transmission. The Admiral's crystalline features appeared on the main screen, and his voice carried the absolute authority of someone who had never been challenged. Captain, Commander Ojina said quietly, 200 ships have us targeted. Let them. Taehyung stepped forward and activated the communication system. Admiral Kreith, I presume. This is Captain Shin Taehyung of the United Earthship Seoul. You have threatened peaceful civilizations under the protection of the Terran Federation. Withdraw your forces or face the consequences. The bridge of Admiral Kreith's flagship fell, silent. Every Velkoth officer turned to stare at their admiral. No species had ever spoken to them this way. No single ship had ever demanded that the entire Velkoth fleet withdraw. Admiral Kreith began to laugh. The sound was like grinding crystal, sharp and unpleasant. Captain Taehyung, you command 1 ship. I command 200. You are surrounded and outnumbered. Surrender immediately and your crew will be allowed to live as servants of the Empire. Admiral, Captain Taehyung replied calmly, you misunderstand the situation. You may command 200 ships, but I command something more valuable. And what is that? Chaos. Before Admiral Kreith could respond, the Seoul opened fire. But not in any pattern the Velkoth had ever seen. Lieutenant Wubin targeted 3 ships simultaneously with quantum torpedoes that moved in curved paths instead of straight lines. Chief Lim activated the Seoul's special maneuvering systems, causing the ship to spin and dive in directions that seemed to violate the laws of physics. The Velkoth formation, designed for perfect coordination, became a liability as ships found themselves firing at positions where the Seoul no longer was. Impossible, Admiral Kreith breathed as he watched the human ship dance between his vessels, like a leaf caught in a hurricane. How are they moving like that? Admiral, one of his officers reported, the enemy ship's movements don't follow any known tactical doctrine. They appear to be improvising their maneuvers in real time. Improvising? The concept was alien to Velkoth thinking. Ships cannot improvise. Tactics must be calculated and coordinated. But the Seoul continued to prove him wrong. Captain Taehyung's crew worked together with a fluid creativity that the Velkoth couldn't comprehend. Each officer anticipated what the others would do, but not because they were following a predetermined plan. They were responding to the battle as it developed, adapting their tactics moment by moment. Chief Lim, bring us around to bearing 270. Lieutenant Wubin, target their communication array on the flagship. Sir, that will put us directly between 15 enemy ships. I'm counting on it. The Seoul spun through space, using the Velkoth, ships themselves as cover. Admiral Kreith found himself in the impossible position of being unable to fire at the human ship without hitting his own vessels. All ships, modify formation to Pattern 7, he commanded. But Pattern 7 was designed for fighting enemies who stayed in predictable positions. The Seoul was already moving to a new location before the Velkoth ships could complete their repositioning. Lieutenant Wubin fired a series of quantum torpedoes that struck the flagship's communication array. Suddenly, Admiral Kreith's perfect coordination began to break down. Individual Velkoth captains, cut off from the hive mind's guidance, hesitated for crucial seconds before acting. Captain, Commander Ojina reported, their response time is increasing. Without constant communication, They're having trouble coordinating. Exactly what we hoped for. Sergeant Major Bay, are your teams ready? Yes, sir. Marine boarding parties standing by. Deploy. The Soul launched a series of small craft that moved like angry wasps toward the nearest Velkoth ships. But these weren't conventional boarding shuttles. They were equipped with the same adaptive technology as the Soul itself, making them nearly impossible to target effectively. Sergeant Major Bae Dong-yun led the first boarding team onto a Velkoth cruiser. What they found surprised them. The ship's interior was like a crystal maze, beautiful but sterile. The Velkoth crew moved with mechanical precision, but when confronted with opponents who didn't follow established patterns, they seemed confused. These aliens fight like robots, Bae reported over his communication link. They know exactly what to do against conventional boarding parties. But we're not conventional. Instead of trying to capture the ship, Bae's teams planted explosive charges on critical systems and retreated. When the charges detonated, the Velkoth cruiser was disabled but not destroyed. It would survive, but it was no longer part of the battle. Admiral, one of Kreeth's officers. Admiral Kreeth stared at the human captain on his communication screen. The crystal formations on his head reflected the emergency lighting from his bridge, creating sharp patterns of red and orange. Around him, his officers worked frantically to assess the damage from the Soul's unexpected attack. Terms? Kreeth's voice carried a mixture of anger and confusion. You speak of terms after attacking a superior fleet? This is not how warfare is conducted. Captain Taehyung remained calm. Admiral, you're right. This isn't how warfare is usually conducted. But then again, you've never fought humans before. Humans. Kreeth said the word like he was tasting something bitter. Your species designation was not in our databases. Where do you come from? A place where we learned that the best way to win a war is to change the rules while you're fighting it. Kreeth cut the communication and turned to his tactical officers. Status report. Admiral, we have suffered damage to 17 vessels. The enemy ship appears to be using weapons technology we have never encountered. Their torpedoes can change direction during flight. And their movements? Completely unpredictable, sir. Our targeting computers cannot calculate firing solutions, because the enemy ship never maintains course or speed for more than 30 seconds. Kreeth moved to the central command platform. Around him, the bridge crew waited for orders. For 800 years, the Velkoth had perfected the art of coordinated warfare. Every battle followed established patterns. Every victory came through superior organization and overwhelming force. But these humans seemed to ignore every principle of proper military conduct. Admiral, another officer reported, long-range sensors show additional ships approaching from multiple vectors. More human vessels? Unknown, sir. The sensor signatures are chaotic. On the Soul's bridge, Captain Taehyung received a priority communication from Chief Lim. Captain, I'm detecting Governor Thessian's refugee fleet approaching from the outer system. 47 ships of various types. Perfect timing, Taehyung said. Open a channel to all refugee ships. Governor Thessian's face appeared on a secondary screen. The alien leader looked exhausted but hopeful. Captain Taehyung, we came as quickly as we could, but our ships are not military vessels. How can we help? Governor, I need you to do exactly what I tell you. Can your ships maintain formation? Yes, but don't maintain formation. I need you to fly like you're trying to escape in 47 different directions. Governor Thessian looked confused. Captain, that would create complete chaos in local space. Exactly. What happened? Next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for decades to come. The refugee fleet scattered across the Zerion system like seeds thrown into a hurricane. Each ship chose its own course, its own speed, its own destination. To the Velkoth sensors, it looked like random panic. But Captain Taehyung saw opportunity in the chaos. Lieutenant Wubin, are you tracking the refugee ships? Yes, sir. 47 vessels on completely independent courses. Use them. The Soul suddenly accelerated toward the nearest refugee ship, a cargo vessel that was fleeing toward the system's outer planets. To Admiral Kreeth, It appeared that the human warship was pursuing helpless civilians. "All ships, intercept the enemy vessel," Kreith commanded. "Protect the civilian craft." It was exactly what Captain Taehyung had hoped for. The Velkoth fleet broke their perfect formation to chase the Soul, spreading themselves across thousands of kilometers of space as they tried to catch a ship that seemed to dart between the refugee vessels like a fish swimming through coral. But the Soul wasn't just running. Every time it passed close to a refugee ship, Lieutenant Wubin launched quantum torpedoes that used the civilian vessel's mass to mask their signatures. By the time the Velkoth ships detected the incoming weapons, the torpedoes were already too close to intercept. "Impossible," breathed one of Kreith's tactical officers as he watched another wave of perfectly coordinated missiles appear from seemingly empty space. "How are they launching weapons from civilian ships?" "They're not," Kreith realized with growing horror. "They're using the civilian ships to hide their weapons until the last moment. But sir, that would require individual targeting calculations for each torpedo based on the random movements of 47 different ships." Exactly. Kreith finally understood what they were facing. These humans don't think like us. They don't plan like us. They improvise solutions faster than we can adapt to them. The Soul continued its deadly dance through the refugee fleet. Chief Lim pushed the ship's maneuvering systems beyond their design limits, spinning and diving through three-dimensional space in patterns that seemed to defy physics. The Velkoth ships, trained to fight in orderly formations, found themselves scattered across the system, unable to coordinate their attacks. "Captain," Commander Ojina reported, "Velkoth ships are starting to collide with each other. They're so focused on tracking us that they're not watching their formation spacing. Their greatest strength becomes their greatest weakness," Captain Taehyung observed. "They've trained so hard to move together that they've forgotten how to think independently." Sergeant Major Bae Donghyun's voice came over the communication system. "Captain, my teams are ready for Phase 2. Deploy." The Soul launched a dozen small craft that scattered in different directions. To the Velkoth, it looked like the human ship was abandoning escape pods. Several Velkoth vessels moved to intercept what they assumed were helpless survivors. Instead, they found Sergeant Major Bae and his Marines. The human boarding craft were unlike anything in the Velkoth databases. They moved like living things, changing direction and speed without warning. When they attached to Velkoth ships, they didn't follow standard boarding procedures. Bae's teams had studied the Velkoth ship designs during the journey to Zarian. They knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum disruption with minimum effort. Instead of fighting their way to the bridge or engine room, they targeted communication relays and coordination computers. "Remember," Bae told his teams over their tactical network, "we're not here to capture ships. We're here to break their ability to work together." The Marines planted charges on critical systems and retreated before the Velkoth defenders could organize a proper response. Within minutes, a dozen Velkoth ships found themselves cut off from their fleet's coordination network. Admiral Kreith watched his perfect fleet dissolve into chaos. Ships that had moved in harmony for centuries suddenly found themselves operating independently. Captains who had never made tactical decisions without consulting the hive mind hesitated at critical moments. "Sir," one of his officers reported, "we're losing communication with ships across the fleet. The human boarding parties are targeting our coordination systems." "Then we adapt," Kreith said grimly. "All ships switch to independent operations. Each captain will engage the enemy using their own judgment." But that command revealed the Velkoth's fatal weakness. Individual Velkoth captains had never learned to think creatively. They had been trained to execute perfect coordinated attacks, not to improvise solutions to unexpected problems. As the Velkoth ships began operating independently, their effectiveness dropped dramatically. They still outnumbered the Soul 200 to 1, but they no longer fought like a unified force. They fought like 200 individual ships, each trying to apply the same tactical solutions to a problem that demanded constant adaptation. "Captain," Taehyung watched the Velkoth fleet's coordination collapse and knew it was time for the final phase of his plan. "Chief Lim, take us directly at their flagship, maximum speed." "Sir, that's Admiral Kreith's command vessel. It's the most heavily armed ship in their fleet. which is exactly why they won't expect us to attack it head-on. The Soul turned toward the massive Velkoth flagship and accelerated to combat speed. Every sensor in the fleet tracked the human ship as it approached what appeared to be certain destruction. Admiral Kreeth smiled for the first time since the battle began. Finally, they make a conventional tactical decision. All ships converge. On the flagship, we will destroy them when they attempt their attack. But Captain Taehyung had no intention of attacking the flagship conventionally. Lieutenant Wubin, prepare all quantum torpedoes for simultaneous launch. Target every ship that moves to intercept us. Sir, that's over 50 ships. We don't have enough torpedoes for individual targeting. We don't need individual targeting, we need area saturation. The Soul fired every torpedo it carried in a single massive volley, but instead of targeting specific ships, the torpedoes were programmed to detonate in a pattern that would create overlapping energy fields throughout the space around the flagship. The Velkoth ships moving to intercept the Soul suddenly found themselves flying through a minefield of quantum explosions. Their perfect formation, designed to maximize firepower and minimize vulnerability, became a death trap as energy cascaded from ship to ship. All ships, scatter, Admiral Kreeth commanded, but it was too late. The quantum field created by the Soul's torpedoes was disrupting the energy flows through his ship's crystalline hulls. Systems failed across the fleet as the aliens' own technology turned against them. In the chaos of the quantum field, the Soul did something that no Velkoth tactician could have predicted. Instead of pressing its attack on the damaged ships, 2 weeks after the Battle of Zirion, news of humanity's victory had spread across the galaxy faster than quantum communication networks could carry it. In the council chambers of a dozen different species, alien leaders gathered around holographic displays showing the impossible, the mighty Velkoth Empire, defeated by a single human ship. On the bridge of the Soul, Captain Shin Taehyung read the latest diplomatic messages flooding in from across known space. The Syrian Confederacy had sent 3 separate requests for military alliance discussions. The Nautiloid Republic was offering trade agreements and requesting human military advisors. Even species that had never made contact with anyone were suddenly broadcasting their coordinates and asking for human protection. Captain, Commander Ojina said, looking up from her communication station, we're receiving another priority message from Admiral Kreeth. He's requesting permission to come aboard. Captain Taehyung set down his datapad and looked at the tactical display. The Velkoth fleet had spent the last 2 weeks in emergency repairs, their perfect formation replaced by chaotic clusters of damaged ships. More than half their vessels were still only partially operational. Has he explained why he wants to meet face to face? No, sir. But the message indicates he's willing to come alone, without escort. Lieutenant Han Wubin looked up from his weapons station. Captain, that would be unprecedented. Velkoth commanders never leave their flagship during military operations. Then he must have something important to discuss. Taehyung made his decision. Grant permission, but full security protocols. Sergeant Major Bay's teams will escort him from the shuttle bay. An hour later, Admiral Kreeth stepped aboard the Soul for the first time. The Velkoth commander was even more impressive in person than he had appeared on communication screens. His crystalline exoskeleton caught the ship's lighting and threw prismatic patterns across the corridor walls. He moved with precise, measured steps that spoke of centuries of military discipline. Sergeant Major Bay Dongyun and 4 Marines escorted the alien admiral through the ship's corridors. Bay noticed that Kreeth observed everything with intense curiosity, studying the human ship's design and layout as if trying to solve a puzzle. Your vessel's internal architecture is chaotic, Kreeth observed as they walked. How so, Admiral? Bay asked. Velkoth ships are designed for maximum efficiency. Every corridor serves a specific purpose. Every room is positioned for optimal function. But your ship seems to have been designed by multiple minds working independently. Bay smiled slightly. Actually, Admiral, that's exactly how it was designed. Different teams of engineers working on different sections, then connecting them together. No single mind could have created something this complex. They entered the Soul's main conference room, where Captain Taehyung waited with his senior staff. The room was deliberately simple, with a large table surrounded by chairs that could accommodate various alien physiologies. The only decoration was a large viewing port that showed the stars beyond. Admiral Kreeth examined each human face carefully before taking his seat. Captain Tae-hyung, Commander Oh-jina, Lieutenant Woo-bin, Chief Lim So-young, and Sergeant Major Bae. 5 individuals who had somehow worked together to accomplish what entire civilizations had failed to do. "Admiral," Captain Tae-hyung said formally, "welcome aboard the Seoul. May I ask what brings you here?" Kreeth was quiet for a long moment, his crystalline features reflecting the starlight from the viewing port. "Captain, in 800 years of Velkoth military history, no enemy has ever forced our fleet to retreat. No species has ever defeated our coordinated tactics. No single ship has ever survived combat against a full Velkoth battle group. And now," Tae-hyung asked, "now I must understand how it was possible." Dr. Kang Minji's voice came over the communication system from Earth. She had been monitoring the meeting remotely, ready to provide xenobiological expertise if needed. "Admiral Kreeth, if I may ask, how does your species normally learn about new military tactics?" Kreeth turned toward the communication speaker. "All knowledge is shared through the collective consciousness. When one Velkoth learns a new technique, all Velkoth learn it simultaneously. This allows us to perfect our strategies across the entire species. And that knowledge is coordinated centrally?" "Yes. Perfect coordination requires perfect information sharing." Captain Tae-hyung leaned forward. "Admiral, may I show you something?" At Tae-hyung's signal, Lieutenant Woo-bin activated a holographic display showing the Battle of Zirion from multiple perspectives. The humans watched as their own tactics played out in 3-dimensional detail. "Tell me, Admiral, when you watch this battle, what do you see?" Kreeth studied the display intently. "I see chaos. Your ship's movements follow no established patterns. Your weapons fire appears random. Your coordination with the civilian vessels makes no tactical sense. And yet we won." "Yes." Kreeth's voice carried a note of frustration. "You won using techniques that should not work." Commander Oh-jina spoke up. "Admiral, may I ask how Velkoth commanders are trained? We study every successful battle in our history. We memorize the optimal responses to every tactical situation. We practice until our coordination is perfect. And what happens when you encounter a situation that's not in your historical database?" Kreeth was quiet for a moment. "That has never happened before?" "Until now," Lieutenant Woo-bin said quietly. Chief Lim So-young activated another section of the holographic display. "Admiral, watch this sequence where we use the refugee ships to mask our torpedo approach. How would Velkoth doctrine handle that situation?" "It would not occur," Kreeth replied immediately. "Velkoth forces do not use civilian vessels in combat operations. It is inefficient and unpredictable. But if it did occur, we have no established response to such tactics." Captain Tae-hyung stood up and walked to the viewing port. Beyond, the transparent metal Zirion continued its slow rotation. "Its people safe for now. Admiral, let me explain something about humans. We don't have a collective consciousness. Every person on this ship thinks independently. When we face a new problem, 200 different minds start working on 200 different solutions. That sounds inefficient. It is inefficient, it's also unstoppable." Tae-hyung turned back to face the Velkoth commander. "Your species perfected coordination, Admiral. You can execute flawless, predetermined strategies. But when something unexpected happens, your entire military structure freezes while waiting for new orders from the collective. Whereas humans adapt. Every officer on this ship has the authority to make tactical decisions. When Lieutenant Woo-bin saw an opportunity to use the civilian ships as cover, he didn't wait for orders. When Chief Lim realized your formation was vulnerable to disruption, she acted immediately. When Sergeant Major Bae's teams found weak points in your ship designs, they exploited them without consulting a tactical database." Dr. Minji's voice came through the speakers again. "Admiral, this represents a fundamental difference in military philosophy. The Velkoth way creates perfect soldiers who execute perfect plans. The human way creates imperfect soldiers who create perfect adaptation. Admiral Kreeth stood up and walked to the viewing port. His crystalline form reflected the stars, creating patterns of light that seemed to shift and change. Dr. Minji, Captain Tae-hyung, I must ask you something that may sound strange. Of course, Admiral. Could humans teach other species to fight this way? The question hung in the air like an unexploded quantum torpedo. Captain Tae-hyung exchanged glances with his officers before responding. Admiral, why would you want to learn human tactics? Because, Kreeth said quietly, the Velkoth Empire has conquered 40 worlds using our methods. But now we have discovered that our methods have limits. If we encounter other species that fight like humans, you would lose. Yes. The admission seemed to pain the proud alien commander. Captain, the Velkoth have never asked another species for help. But I must ask, would humans be willing to share their knowledge of warfare? Sergeant Major Bay spoke up. Admiral, human military doctrine isn't something you can just memorize and download to your collective consciousness. It requires individual creativity, independent thinking, and the ability to make decisions without consulting higher authority. That sounds like the opposite of everything the Velkoth represent, Commander Ojina observed. Exactly, Kreeth replied. And that is why we need to learn it. Captain Tae-hyung returned to his seat at the conference table. Admiral, are you suggesting that the Velkoth Empire wants to fundamentally change its military structure? I am suggesting that the Velkoth Empire wants to survive. We have encountered a form of warfare that we cannot counter using our current methods. Either we adapt, or we face eventual defeat by any species that learns to fight like humans. The implications of Kreeth's words were staggering. The most militarily successful empire in galactic history was asking for help from a species they had never heard of 2 weeks ago. There would be conditions, Captain Tae-hyung said carefully. What conditions? First, the Velkoth Empire ends, its expansion. No more conquered worlds. Kreeth nodded. Acceptable. Second, the worlds you've already conquered are given the option of independence or voluntary association. That would be difficult. Many of our subjects, Admiral, Dr. Minji's